Hi, today I'm going to be talking to you about Dr. Diane Nahl's affective load theory and how it relates to information behavior and information seeking. Dr. Nahl has been a full professor in the Department of Information and Computer Sciences, Library and Information Science program at the University of Hawaii since 2006. She spent her entire career at the University of Hawaii, graduating with a BA in psychology in 1976, an MLS in 1983, and a PhD in communication and information sciences in 1993. Her areas of study include information behavior and affective computing and information technology literacy, all of which you will see reflected in affective load theory. Affective load theory, or ALT, was developed out of behavioral approaches from the field of psychology and is a social behavioral approach to studying the thoughts and feelings of those engaged in information behavior. Dr. Nahl summarizes ALT in her chapter in Theories of Information Behavior by saying, quote, ALT proposes that all information behavior involves affective states that provide specific goal directionality and motivation to support cognitive activity. I'm going to define that a lot more specifically in the next few slides, but in the meantime, as sort of a simplified overview of the theory, the idea is that a user's affect, or the emotions they experience throughout a search process, not only influences, but is integral to their cognitive behavior during the search. The higher their negative affect, the less effective their cognitive strategies tend to be during a search. So the first thing we want to talk about is Nahl's idea of the relationship between affective, cognitive, and sensory motor behavior. In a 1996 paper titled Affective and Cognitive Search Behavior of Novice End Users of a Full Text Database, Nahl cataloged the types of questions new users of a database asked as they conducted their searches. She talked about how these three domains, the affective or emotional domain, the cognitive or logical domain, and the sensory motor or physical domain all work in concert throughout a search. And here's a quote. The affective domain of the searcher includes the continuous motivational energy provided by one's intent, goal, purpose, or use, as well as the emotional dynamic features that determine the quality of the search process, e.g. perseverance, preferences for move types, paying attention to detail, frustration, hope, disappointment, excitement, disbelief, etc. The affective domain pulls together into one powerful category the entire motivational and emotional involvement of searchers. And this went on to sort of form the basis for her ideas behind affective load during searches. So here are the definitions of some key terms that are all taken from Nahl's 2004 paper, Measuring the Affective Information Environment of Web Searchers, which first introduced the concept of affective load. Now the first, so in this study, she empirically defines certain affective measures. And the way that they were measured was this study involved college students enrolled in a writing intensive psychology seminar where they had to do several searches for reports. And they self-evaluated at the beginning and end of each of their searches using questionnaires where they were asked to rate things like their frustration level on a scale of 1 to 10. So they would rate how motivated they were at the beginning to complete a search task, which became task completion motivation. They would rank their uncertainty, which was a negative affective component, which was defined through 4 escalating scale, starting with irritation, anxiety, frustration, and rage. And then time pressure was calculated by taking the expected length, which is how long the user thought it was going to take them to finish the search, minus the felt length, which at the end of the search was how long they felt like it actually took. And so Dr. Nahl came out with the equation for affective load, which was AL equals U times TP, uncertainty multiplied by time pressure. So sort of the converse of that is affective coping skills. The affective load is made up of negative affective things, how much time pressure you feel, how much uncertainty. Affective coping skills are sort of more on the positive end. So those are defined as self-efficacy, which is how confident a searcher feels in their competence to succeed before they start a task, and search optimism, which is defined as their motivation to postpone quitting in the face of negative affective pressures. And that becomes affective coping skills, which is those two positive affects added together. And those were found to lower affective load, basically. This is interesting because in 2005, Dr. Nahl published a affective and cognitive information behavior, interaction effects in internet use. And she refined the affective load model. And also in that study added the dimension of measuring cognitive skills through a timed memory test, and trying to determine how affective load influenced the performance of both low and high cognitive skill groups. She found that, quote, the group with high cognitive skills reported significantly higher optimism, higher affective coping skills, and higher felt exercise of control, demonstrating an interaction between cognitive and affective skills. It is clear from these results that cognitive and affective skills enhance each other. So this next slide is a chart from that study that I thought was interesting because it found that high affective coping skills led to a lower affective load, which is sort of the stress that keeps you from performing better cognitively, in both the high and low cognitive skills groups, while low affective coping skills led to significantly higher affective load, even for high cognitive skills students. So in terms of the significance and impact of this theory, it has really advanced the concept that cognitive skills alone do not determine success in information seeking. It has been used in the past 15 or 20 years in user-focused research to explain and track the role of emotion or affect in search behavior for students and library patrons. And it has also led to calls for affective skills to be taught alongside cognitive skills in critical thinking and information literacy classes. The specific study cited there talks about building confidence and using new or unfamiliar technologies as a skill that could be taught in library information literacy programs as a standard. And then the next study, which is the one that is the suggested reading, uses affective load theory to sort of explain some parts of how library anxiety affects critical thinking skills. It found that in line with the principles of affective load theory, students with more confidence and critical thinking abilities were better able to mitigate their library anxiety, where they found that positive affect didn't prevent the library anxiety, but it did make it easier for them to overcome it. And in 2007, Dr. Nahl published Information and Emotion, the Emergent Affective Paradigm in Information Behavior Research and Theory, which studies the affective aspects of information behavior in populations including children, critical care nurses, stay-at-home mothers, and blind people. And in terms of critical evaluation, one of the biggest strengths is how relevant the research is. It's new. All of it applies to technology and the interactions between humans and technology in the internet age. So there are a lot of places you can go with it because it addresses all of the types of search behavior that are happening in this day and age. One of the weaknesses, I think, is that affective state can still be very broadly defined. In terms of affective load, Dr. Nahl is very specific with uncertainty and time pressure, but I think in other studies, they need to really define well what affect they're looking at. I think you can't just say like emotions in general. There has to be one and you need to be able to define it. In terms of another one of its sort of broader uses, it's part of a larger framework that Dr. Nahl developed called the Social Biological Information Technology Model. And the quote about that is that the main goal of the SBIT model is to demonstrate how the cognitive and affective domains of humans are organically interdependent in processing and using information. It's a framework that encompasses how affective, cognitive, and sensory motor processes interact with technology. For personal reflections, it was really interesting to me to see how much of the idea of the interplay between affective and cognitive lined up with sort of cognitive behavioral therapeutic methods for dealing with anxiety, where you're taught basically to sort of separate your affective and cognitive reactions and not to let your affective reaction hijack your cognitive processes, which is sort of like she's basically saying in the affective load that if you have high stress, it can lower your cognitive performance. So being cognizant of that in cognitive behavioral therapy is really an interesting parallel. It was also validating to see emotion recognized as integral to success in information behavior. I think as a stressed child, a lot of times you would hear just try harder. And it's nice to be able to be like, I don't think trying is the problem. I would also be super interested as the mother of a child with ADHD to see how affective load theory could be used to study a population with ADHD, whose specific executive functioning differences, such as trouble breaking tasks into pieces and time blindness, might make them more prone to high affective load, and what could be done to mitigate that. So as for discussion questions, I have, do you agree that affect and emotion or emotion always drives cognitive behavior? And can you think of a situation where affect is not involved at all in information seeking behavior? For the second one, I have a effective information literacy standard from the cited paper that you can look at. It lists what they want the student to be able to do and what the specific outcomes they're looking for are. And so reading that, my question is whether you believe that adding affective information literacy standards to existing cognitive standards will improve overall information literacy, and can skills like flexibility, resilience, and confidence be successfully taught and empirically measured? And that is it for me. Thank you so much for listening today. And I look forward to the discussion in the forum. Thank you.